Ready to go? Okay. Now, when we hear about the Egyptian Book of the Dead, our imaginations run wild, provoked by the mysteries of the ancient Egyptians, their magical rites, and their obsession to continue beyond this limited existence. They desired nothing less than to achieve immortality. But what did this realm of immortality look like? And how would they get there? We know that early on, through archaeological evidence, that at first, whatever would transpire in the afterlife, it would somehow involve the actual physical human body of the deceased, at least for the pharaohs and nobles, and that certain rites and actions involving this body connected to their fivefold understanding of the soul. For most of us, we quickly recognize mummification, right, as one of these practices. And again, this process of preserving of the human body through a series of chemicals and natural ingredients and wrappings, and again, mostly for the elite. For the Egyptians, the religious beliefs, including a very complex mythology, it was ever present in their lives. For these ancient peoples, we have no apparent divisions between our modern notions of religious and secular. The gods and goddesses were very real, interacted directly with them, and required, even demanded, at times worship. They bridged the gap between life and death, and whatever passage one would make from one to the other would absolutely, completely involve them and their powers. The Egyptians inscribed these sacred interactions with their deities, including the ones related to their journey to the afterlife, within their temples and within their tombs. These became known as the pyramid texts, at least the earliest form we have of them, and they date back to the Old Kingdom, specifically the end of the 5th dynasty, the earliest from around 24 to 2300 BCE. These kinds of texts continue on to the first intermediate period, which is 2181 to 2055 BCE. As expected, they were only intended for the pharaohs. Then, during the first intermediate period, the coffin texts come about, evolving directly from the earlier pyramid texts. As true to their name, they were inscribed or painted within the coffin, and unlike the pyramid texts, were elaborately illustrated. Something else occurred too, for as opposed to focusing entirely upon mythology and magic and ritual action, the coffin texts also connected to themes of daily life in Egypt, of wants and of desires, of hopes of the individual. The coffin texts were no longer exclusively for pharaohs, or the nobles for that matter, for anyone who can afford a coffin could fill them with these spells and observations of life. Now, beyond within coffins, by the Middle Kingdom, 2040 to 1782 BCE, these texts were found on the walls of their tombs, on connected chests, on stelae, and eventually on mummy masks and papyri, right? Now, of course, these coffin texts had a very practical purpose, to be able to make one cross the chasm from life into death, wherein awaited a happy and blissful afterlife. The coffin texts provided the instructions on how to get there, the magical spells needed to be said to open various passageways beyond for a very, very safe trip. Now, as you can see, the emergence of what would be known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead is a very gradual process. The next logical step was to move from texts inscribed or painted on walls and then within coffins to being written on papyrus or linen, fashioned into, well, an actual book, which would then typically be placed with the deceased. Now, this evolution came about during the second intermediate period between 1700 to 1550 BCE. It happened around Thebes. Much of these versions included spells from both the pyramid texts and the coffin texts. The full development throughout both Lower and Upper Egypt, however, occurred then during the New Kingdom, 1550 to 1069 BCE. And this practice continued all the way to the Roman era. Now, kind of a nice overview here. Now we have to clarify a few things. When we hear that we are talking about the Egyptian Book of the Dead, we imagine one single standardized text, a monolithic sacred book, much like the Vedas or the Bible or the Talmud or the Quran, right? This is not the case. In actuality, the Book of the Dead varied from text to text, some having some spells, others different ones. Of course, most of them had certain elements in common, and this homogeneous tendency increased as time went on, right? And I know we call them the Book of the Dead, the name, right? This designation was not what the Egyptians called it. The Egyptians called it something else. You see, the Egyptologist by the name of Carl Richard Lepsius in 1842 came up with the name, the Book of the Dead. 1842. I know, you're just going, the shackles are falling before your eyes. Well, that's, and of course he was German, so it wasn't really Book of the Dead. It was Totenbuch, which means, of course, Book of the Dead in German. So what happened? So what was the ancient name for the Book of the Dead? It was Runu Parat Emheru. I'll say it again. Runu Parat Emheru. What does that mean? It means spells of coming forth by day. Spells of coming forth by day, as in the dawn of the day. So it's connected, of course, to another life. Got it? Now we're going to go ahead. So let's begin this exciting venture into the Egyptian realm of the dead. Let us descend and ascend with the coming of the days of immortality. But before we discuss the Book of the Dead, let us first excavate the origins of this text with, of course, we'd be remiss not to do it, the pyramid texts. We got to start there. Got to start at the beginning. So here we go. So while the Pharaoh Unas was the very last ruler of the 5th dynasty during the Old Kingdom, he ruled from 2375 to 2345. These dates are approximate. He is the first to have what are called the pyramid texts that are buried with him. Now let's go to the first image. Woohoo! So Unas is most known for the building of the pyramid at Saqqara, the smallest one, actually, the royal pyramids. Yet he was the first pharaoh to have the inner chambers of this pyramid inscribed and painted with these texts, which consist of 283 spells. These underground chambers were unexplored until 1881, when the Frenchman Gaston Maspero discovered what would be the largest corpus of religious texts from the Old Kingdom. That same year, by the way, Maspero, who was considered the foremost Egyptologist of his generation, discovered a hidden tomb near Deir al-Bahiri, which contained, by the way, 40 mummies, including that of Seti I, Amenhotep I, Thutmose III, and yes, even Ramses II, the very notable pharaoh. So there you have that. Okay, so let's move right along. Let's see my face again. You can see the pyramid there. Actually, let's go to the next image. But with that said, one of the central figures of both the pyramid texts and later of the Book of the Dead was Ra, who was not an important deity until the third dynasty of the Old Kingdom. Now, ruling around 2740 BCE, the second king of the second dynasty was named Ranib, which is you're seeing right here in this image, which is of some importance because his special name is written by using the hieroglyphic sign of the sun. Now, the name can be translated two ways. It can say either Ra is my Lord or Lord of the Sun, and cannot be any more exacting unless we knew the context. If it does refer to Ra, it is an important revelation. You see, up until this point, believe it or not, there is no evidence for a sun cult in Egypt. I know when we typically think of Egypt, we think of Ra, but during this period, it was not Ra, but Horus and Seth that dominated much of the Egyptian religion. So, we have that playing upon the inherent dualism between the two. Still, we have to wait until the reign of King Dozer of the third dynasty for any more definite evidence for developing sun cult that was specifically connected to Ra. At first, Ra was specifically associated with the midday sun, but eventually became connected to all phases of the sun throughout the day. As the god of the sun, he was connected to light, warmth, and of course, the growth of the vegetative world. Now let's go to the next image. Ra traveled on two boats. The first was known as the Manjit, the boat of a million years, or morning boat for his journey across the sky during the day. And then on his evening boat, known as the Mescatet, as he then traveled below the earth and into the underworld, where he faced the mighty serpent dragon Apophis. Now, what happened is that Ra defeated him and emerged once more into the realm of light. To switch boats once again. Let's go to the next image. Now, Apep, this is the image here, was also known as Apophis. He was described as the great serpent or the great dragon, who, as the deified representative of darkness, also fought against Mat, the deification of light and truth. But his main opponent was indeed Ra, the god of the sun, attempting to thwart his journey through the underworld so he would not rise again to give the upper world his life-giving light. While Apophis was often shown as waiting to attack Ra and his entourage at the 10th region of the night, just before dawn, in some versions, he waited instead at the first region of the night where the sun sets, hiding behind the western mountains known as Baku. Just how Apophis was condemned to be such a terror of the underworld is disputed by various legends, with some Egyptians believing he was previously a supreme god, but was then overthrown by Ra and condemned below, much like Zeus had condemned Kronos in Greek mythologies. Others contend that Apophis was condemned to the underworld because of some wicked action against the other gods. Typically, Apophis locked his eyes upon Ra and his followers moving along their night barge. And then what he did is he hypnotized them as he cut off the river of the underworld with his coils. Sek and Mot assisted sometimes Apophis. Occasionally, Apophis entered into the upper world and actually swallowed Ra, this being on the occasions of a solar eclipse. Egyptian priests composed a special ritual work known as the Book of Overthrowing Apep to help Ra and the other gods and Pharaoh fight the great dragon of darkness, especially during these times. At one point, this work declares spitting upon Apep, defiling Apep with the left foot, taking a lance to smite Apep, fettering Apep, taking a knife to smite Apep, putting fire upon Apep, unquote. The work also instructs how one should make wax models of Apophis, and then through sympathetic magic, ritually kill or at least wound Apophis via spitting and mutilating or burning the image of his likeness. If not wax, a drawing of the serpent of Apophis would sometimes suffice. Apophis was also known as the swallower of souls, which made him somewhat connected with Mot, who was also known as the swallower of souls as well. Mot was a deification of the Egyptian concept of death, and at the same time, of course, many of the other gods of death throughout the ancient Near East had the same name. So there you have it. Right now, let's go to the next image. So here we go. Okay, so we're right on to the pyramid texts. Now we're looking at a particular group of them. These are known as the Cannibal hymns. During the time of the Old Kingdom, the Egyptians they came to believe that because the pharaoh needed special supernatural strength that was necessary to make his journey, he must eat the proper food even before embarking on this journey. Yet he cannot eat the material kind of food that he once ate in life. No. So let's look at me for a second. So, no, he was required to eat the food provided by the gods in the form of, well, themselves. That's right. The gods actually turned themselves into sacred bowls for his consumption, so that by eating them, he might participate in their divine powers and so easily gain entry into the heavenly realm. So you partake of the body of the gods, and by partaking of the body of the gods, you get, as a result of taking them in within yourself, you attain purity. And as a result, this form of purity and perfection, where you, in a sense, become a god, will then save you. Now, I know it sounds like a completely strange concept, this idea of partaking. Oh, yeah, you've heard this one before. This song and dance goes along in the Greek and Roman mystery cults. And of course, you do have the Eucharist too, right? So, but anyway, so there you have it. So one of these so-called cannibal hymns, the pyramid texts for Eunice, declares as follows. It says, a god who lives on his fathers, who feeds on his mothers, Eunice is the bull of heaven who rages in his heart, who lives on the being of every god, who eats their entrails when they come, their bodies full of magic from the Isle of Flame. These cannibal hymns may reflect an actual early royal butchery ritual that was performed by the priests upon the deceased pharaoh. So that's a pretty interesting thought. Now, according to the pyramid texts, the pharaoh was assisted with the sacred ritual of consuming the gods by the demonic god of slaughter and execution known as Shesmu. Let's take a look at Shesmu here. Shesmu is the center there. So Shesmu. Now, Shesmu was very interesting. He was, sorry, this was the god of slaughter and execution. He was the servant of Osiris, whose realm, of course, was the underworld. It occupied this space that was both light and dark, and yet transcended both. Curiously, he was also the god of oil, perfume, and yes, red wine. Actually, especially red wine. In fact, when Shesmu punished evildoers, he typically placed their heads into a supernatural wine press and squeezed them until all their blood was drained out of their bodies. Because of this rather macabre scene, Shesmu is often known by the epithet demon of the wine press. Yet for the righteous, Shesmu offered refreshing red wine upon their soul's arrival to, to the afterlife to quench their thirst. Sometimes Shesmu was depicted with the head of a falcon, but is often shown just looking like a man, like here. Now properly fed with spiritual god food, the pharaoh began his journey, sometimes as noted by one text, he rises to the heavenly realm via a celestial ladder. Let's go ahead and go to me again. So here we go. I actually have a quote here. It says, "Hail, daughter of Anubis, above the hatches of heaven, comrade of Thoth, above the ladder's rails, open Unis's path, let Unis pass." As you would expect from the land of the Nile, there's no denial. Other times, crossing to the realm of death was described as being ferried across. Here it goes. If you fail to ferry Unis, he will leap and sit on the wing of Thoth. Then he will ferry Unis to that side. Okay. But there are various hurdles along the way, and the pyramid texts are there to help us as best we can. For instance, there were certain lakes in the realm of the dead that could entrap the soul. Fortunately for the pharaoh, the pyramid texts provide Unis with the necessary magic and words, special ritual words to protect him. One passage reading, "O Unis, beware of the lake. Say 4 times, the messenger of your Ka have come to you. The messengers of your father have come to you. The messengers of Ra have come to you." So you're supposed to say that 4 times, and it's supposed to protect you. Now, according to the Egyptians, the soul is actually consisted of 5 parts. There's 5 parts of the soul. You have what's called the Ren. You have what's called the Shut. You have the Ib. You have the Ba, and you have the Ka. Now, if you count the Ak, that would be 6, but we're not going there yet. So how does this work, right? Okay, so the Ren, let's start with the Ren. The Ren is that part of the soul which is connected to the person's name. You see, upon birth, when the name is given to the person, the soul becomes connected to that name. And so as long as the name is remembered, even after death, the person goes on. This name is to be protected. This is why the name, when written down, is protected by a magical rope. That magical rope, of course, is known as a cartouche. And what it does is it protects your name. If there was no magical cartouche around your name, somebody could have the power, take the power of your name, and possibly decide your fate, to even control you. You have the person's name, you have their power. This is an ancient Egyptian concept. That's why later on, when you see those who are going through the gates of the underworld, the various papyri, the magical papyri, give way the names of the various guardians, so that what you say it unlocks those doors. Because those names are supposed to be, shh, nobody's supposed to know. So, but anyway, so that is right there, once again, that is the Ren. What is the Shut? The Shut means shadow. And the idea is that your shadow is connected to the person and soul in some way. So the idea then again is that you're wherever you go, your shadow goes. Maybe. Unless it's really bright, right? And your shadow disappears. So there it is. Now, the Ib. What is the Ib? The Ib is the metaphysical heart associated with the person's emotion and thought and intent and will. This fact found its way into the Egyptian language, so that if one was feeling happiness, they were experiencing At-Ib. which translates literally as wideness of heart. But if one was upset or hurt, they had takib, meaning a truncated heart. This metaphysical heart was believed to continue on and was in some way connected to the space occupied by the real heart, or at least symbolized by it, so that while all the organs were removed when you embalmed the body, the actual heart was to remain for just this reason. The heart was to be examined, of course, by Anubis and the other gods, and then weighed by Mot, the god of truth, against a feather. If the heart was light as a feather, it would pass on to the realm of bliss. But if a person was heavy-hearted, they were cast into the darkness to be swallowed by Amit or Mot, meaning, of course, Amit meaning the soul eater or the devourer. Often depicted as part crocodile, part hippopotamus, even part lion. Amit was a female demon who lived near the Hall of the Two Truths, and her conception of the person's heart did not mean the end of their existence, but simply ensured that they would be restless forever and not go on to the realm of everlasting life. She was often depicted as living besides a lake of fire. Now, of course, a guy by the name of George Lucas took advantage of this because you would be devoured for, millions, thousands of years. And there's a reference to this story in Return of the Jedi. Moving right along. Boba Fett, remember? So the most important part of the soul, however, what happened to be the Ba and the Ka. Now, the Ba is the individual's personality. This is what makes you unique. This is who you are specifically. Unlike Ren, which is a name, or Shut, which is shadow, or even Ib, the heart, after it's weighed, the Ba is part of you. It's one part of you, one of two, that lives on after death and is often represented as a bird with a human head. So that's often, in fact, let's take a look at an image. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at somebody's Ba. So the Ba, in a sense, was the moral essence of the person, which was able to both move the person emotionally and move them physically. Hence, the Ba enabled the spirit to move about the afterlife. So that's why this is important. Let's go to the next image. You have the Ka. The Ka is your vital essence, that part of you that actually gives you life, and apart from which you cannot live. Now, the god Khnum was believed to create each person's soul on a potter's wheel, and when it's done, he breathes into it the breath of life that is the Ka, and that therefore it lives. Now, Khnum was actually the god also of the source of the Nile River, and is specifically tied to the life-giving silt and clay brought down by this river. So his connection to the clay of humanity makes sense from an Egyptian standpoint. In hieroglyphs, the word Ka is represented by a pair of arms. Yet in actual imagery, Ka was depicted looking very much the same as the individual, only smaller in size. So you have that. Now, what happens is that when you die, the Ka leaves the body, but through the opening of the mouth ritual, the Ba is released and permitted to join the Ka in the afterlife. As a result, the combined Ba and Ka, you're seeing parts of this here, are called the Ak, which means the effective one. Now, it is sometimes represented as a crested ibis or some kind of bird, or as a Shabti-like mummy image, and we have some of these images right here. The Ak could still visit this life and do good or bad to those still living, and is connected to the idea of the person's ghost too. Yet the Ak also dwells within the physical body. That is that is preserved. So the opening of the mouth ceremony also reanimates the body in the afterlife. The sun itself is connected with this new life, for while each day the sun is in the sky, each night, as you know, travels into the underworld known as Duat to the realm of Osiris, where it reemerges with the deceased with new life, so to live again. Now, a tomb of a fairy, a nomarch for the 18th dynasty, declares, "Your life happening again without your ba being kept away from your divine corpse, with your ba together, with your ak. You shall emerge each day and return each evening. A lamp will be lit for you in night until the sunlight shines forth on the breast. You shall be told, welcome, welcome into your house of the living." So there you have it. And of course, obviously, this idea that your soul can float around connects to the idea of Egyptian beliefs concerning dreaming too, that when you sleep at night, your soul goes a fluttering away. In the case of Unas, his pyramid text declares at one point, Ra Atun, this Unas comes to you, a spirit indestructible. Your son comes to you. This Unas comes to you. May you cross the sky, united in the dark. May you rise in the light land, the place in which you shine. Okay, let's see me for a few moments here. So that way we defined the different parts of the soul. Now, after death, according to the pyramid text, the king must first rise from his tomb. Utterance 373 describes it goes as follows. It says, oh, rise up, O Teti, take your head, collect your bones, gather your limbs, shake the earth from your flesh, take your bread that rots not, your beer that sours not, stand at the gates that bar the common people. You see a little elitism here, right? The gatekeeper comes out to you. He grasps your hand, takes you into heaven to your father Gib. He rejoices at your coming, gives you his hands, kisses you, caresses you, sets you before the spirits and the imperishable stars. The hidden ones worship you. The great ones surround you. The watchers wait on you. Barley is threshed for you. Emmer is reaped for you. Your monthly feasts are made with it. Your half-month feasts are made with it. As orders done for you by Gib your father, rise up, O Teti, you shall not die. Okay, rise up, O Teti. You saw the mention of beer here, right? So what's going on here? Naturally, the ancient Egyptians, beer was their favorite beverage, and the afterlife for them cannot be devoid of it. Of course, it couldn't be sour. Nobody wants sour beer. In fact, there's a reason why it's mentioned in this way. Let's go to this next image. You'll see why. Now, there's a limestone statuette of a female brewer that was placed in the tomb. Mersonk of Saqqara from the 5th dynasty is intended to represent the perpetual brewing of the beer everlasting. The beer will go on, ever floweth. Egyptians consumed beer daily. It was considered a regular food source. It was oftentimes used instead of water. They used beer for payment and used it for offerings to the gods. Now, obviously, beer was imbibed in abundance at various religious celebrations. Even Hathor, the focus of many of these festivities, was often called the Lady of Drunkenness. Now, with that said, what about the sour reference? Did you guys know that Egyptian beer was different from our beer? It was much sweeter, often watered down with cherry syrup, and other fruits were used in this beer, such as dates mixed in. So the idea is beer for the ancient Egyptians was supposed to be sweet. We know this also from doing various chemical analysis on traces of this beer. So we know that there are fruits in it. It's sweet. So this idea of having sour beer has more relevance here. Does that make sense, right? As for the gates and gatekeepers you heard mentioned in here, Egyptians came to believe that there existed multiple gates that one had to pass through in order to, throughout the inner life, in order to gain salvation. Typically, of course, minor deities guarded each one. Souls gain entry through these gates only if they provided the proper magic word and or conducted the proper ritual or simply gave their name. At times, we have evidence for as many as 1,000 guardians for these gates. With the later Book of the Dead, the number is oftentimes reduced to 7. Actually, let's go to the next image, because this is an image of one of these gatekeepers standing between, of course, the gods, but you have here, of course, Horus and Set. But the idea is these are pylons. He's a gatekeeper. So that's the image there. Then, of course, next image. And then, of course, the reference to Gib. Gib is on the bottom there. He is the earth god who is paired with Nut, the sky goddess. And together they produce Isis, Osiris, Seth, and Nephthys. So obviously one's the sky is above, and Geb is obviously standing below. Okay, so you can see that there. Okay, you can put the image down. Ultimately, the Ba and the Ka of Pharaoh Unas was believed to merge with Osiris, the lord of the underworld, in aspect. The pyramid text declaring, "O Unas, you have not gone dead. You have not gone alive to sit on the throne of Osiris. Your scepter is in your hand that you may give orders to the living. The handle of your lotus-shaped scepter in your hand. Give orders to those of the mysterious sights, the dead." Well, the pharaohs would go on to Ra and his sky barge. Average Egyptians did not get to ride this barge, but still had a very pleasant afterlife if they were indeed righteous. But let's talk about Osiris. Let's go to the next image. Now, Osiris is so important in the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, and later the Book of the Dead. He was the god of the underworld, the afterlife, and the dead, while his wife Isis was the goddess of the realm of life, of nature, and of magic. Osiris was essentially a god of the earth and vegetation who died every year during the annual drought. Meanwhile, Isis was the nature goddess who had the power, the magic to help resurrect him so he could live and thrive again, as represented by the inundation of the Nile. Plutarch states, as they regard the Nile as the effusion of Osiris, so they hold and believe the earth to be the body of Isis, not all of it, but so much of it as the Nile covers, fertilizing it and uniting it with it. In short, Osiris represents moisture. Let's go to me now. You see the Osiris there. Not only the Nile, but every form of moisture they call simply the effusion of Osiris. And in their holy rites, the water jar in honor of the gods' heads in the procession. And so what happens is, that he connects to also the Rush, which represents a king in the southern region of the world, of the kingdom. He's also connected to the phallus. He's also known as the god of the source of fecundity. In fact, he will give blessings. If he gives blessings, he gives blessings 3 times. So it is thrice happy are we when it comes to Osiris and his gifts. Now, obviously, he's connected to the primary material substances of earth and air and fire. Now, with Plutarch, by the way, Osiris is directly connected also to the male member, to the phallus as well. Osiris is often depicted. Wait a second. There we go. Yes, this is a real Osiris, owned by me. It is 3,000 years old. So pretty cool. You see the conical. It's kind of very dark. So let's continue. I figure, why not hold Osiris as I'm talking about Osiris? How often does this happen? Okay. So he's often depicted with the pharaoh's beard, with his legs partly mummified. Osiris is sometimes depicted with green skin in connection to plants, and sometimes, as you see here, with black skin in connection to the rich and moist fertile mud of the Nile. Plutarch notes, Osiris, according to their legendary tradition, was dark because water darkens everything, earth and clothes and clouds, when it comes into contact with them. And so you have here, typically Osiris holds a crook, Heka, and the flail, and this one does as well. We see it, there it is. There you go. See both there? Can you guys see it? It's kind of dark, but you get the idea. There it is. The crook and the flail, with the shepherd's crook standing for kingship and the flail standing for the fertility of the land. The crook and the flail were symbols of pharaonic power and appeared first in this context before being related to Osiris. A crook was a tool that was used by shepherds to move animals along, nudging them and guiding them to go in the right direction. Meanwhile, the flail was an agricultural tool that was used to thresh grain from their husks, in essence. The crook was applied more gently, and the flail more harshly. And so symbolically, when placed together, it represents the spectrum of strength and gentleness in rule, with each balancing one and the other out, as both were shown as crossing the chest. The earliest royal crook is from the Gurza culture, also known as Nakwa II, which is 3500 to 3200 BCE, from Abydos, but already by the second dynasty, 2890 to 2686, the crook and flail were paired together. Of course, we find the crook and flail paired upon the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun as well. So you find that interesting, right? So now, not every day you see an Osiris, right? Okay. There's more to come. Let's move on to the coffin texts. That's right, the coffin texts. Now, the next step in the evolution towards the Book of the Dead were the coffin texts, which, of course, derive from the pyramid texts, but have a more widespread usage, appealing to commoners, or at least those who could afford to cover the interior of their coffins with these texts. You know, maybe you do it yourself. I don't know, after a while, right? And of course, these images are and connect to practices and words in order to secure your afterlife. Most of the coffin texts date from the Middle Kingdom, and they include around 1,185 spells. So let's take a look at a coffin text. Here, let's go to the next image. Woo-hoo. There it is. An example of such a text was found at Deir al-Bersha and belonged to a certain Gua from the 12th dynasty. It's 1985 to 1795 BCE. Now, Gua was a high official, and he was able to afford an elaborate frieze of objects, having texts on all sides of the coffin. Amongst the spells and images of amulets in the coffin, you have the text from what's called the Book of the Two Ways. You can see, by the way, before we move on, you could see the river, the upper river and the lower river on the right-hand side there. We'll talk about that soon. So let's go to the next image. There it is. Now, the Book of the Two Ways. It's also known as the Guide to the Ways of Restau. This text was discovered, on a on a few of the coffins from Deir el-Birsha, and it basically contains a map to the underworld. The lid of the coffins are painted on the inside with the goddess Nut, or the sky itself, and so represent the upper realm of the gods and goddesses. So that means that the lid, the upper inside lid, has the image of the sky deity Nut, who extends over. Meanwhile, the Book of the Two Ways is painted on the floor as well as the side. The book begins at sunrise, then proceeds throughout the day, and much of the action occurs in the sky during this time, and then eventually it moves on to sunset. What follows is a journey into the underworld and the two ways or two paths that zigzag through this treacherous realm. Let's go to the next image. There's an image there. You can see right there. There's right. This, of course, these two ways are full of obstacles and demons. Rustau is specifically located at the boundary of the sky, trapped in darkness and surrounded on all sides by a lake of fire, which also separates the two ways, which are located on each fiery shore. Yet this fire is not only destructive, but can also be a regeneration. Let's go to the next image. There you go. It can do regeneration. For here is located the body of Osiris. And if one is able to approach this body and look upon it, well, then they will not die. Now, the goal is the field of offerings and a chance to feast with Osiris. This path is not easy, with high walls of stone, walls of fire, and, of course, pitch darkness. A few versions describe a mansion with many rooms, each containing various creatures and monsters. The deceased making this journey is often described as a magician, and the longer version of the Book of the Ways has them call out for the great sky bark of Ra, saying as follows. Let's go to the next image. O Mohath, awaken, Akan for me, as you are endowed with life. See, I have come. Now, Mohath is basically the ferryman who was the captain of the bark leading to the underworld. His name derives from the Egyptian phrase, the stern is behind him, but was subsequently changed to mean he who sees behind him, as the ferryman is always looking back over his shoulder. And look here, in this image right here, he is looking, yes, over his shoulder. As far as Akan, well, who is Akan in this story, this quotation? He was the patron and custodian of this boat, named the Messiket, that carried the souls of the deceased. When not on board transporting the dead, he was in a deep sleep, and only the ferryman, Mohath, could awaken him. They initially are unwilling to transport the deceased, claiming it was broken down. The boat is all broken down. Not crossing today. Nope, nothing's going to get you across. But the deceased eventually convinces them, for after all, the deceased claimed that Ra was the one who beloved him, and so whom the Father greatly loves. So, hey, Ra is on your side. Ra, Ra, Ra. Now what happens? But to navigate, the deceased must use a series of spells to keep the bark heading for its correct destination. Next image, including spells to safely cross the ring of fire and other spells of guidance along the path of Rustau. This, by the way, is an image of the lake of fire. So I find that quite interesting, right? Now, the short version begins at this enormous palace with these mighty high walls of flame, and it is described as the mansion of the many-faced. To enter, the deceased declares, I am a builder, and I have knowledge. I am a builder, and I raise up my father. He also claimed to be, if you're going to this afterlife, you claim to be the Lord of secret things. The Lord of secret things, right? There is, of course, a spell right here. Actually, I'll go this here. you're supposed to say this as follows. You're supposed to say, you can go back to my face. You're supposed to say, I am the torch and the flame. I am the spear, which is the hand which is stabbed at those below. O you of fire, beware of me, for I am the knife which pierces the middle of the head. Ouch, right? It is I who repels her and gives her to the earth gods who are in the lake. Gib is your protector. Down on your face. Do not frustrate his actions. This is spell 1141. The two ways are depicted in different manners, but the upper path is typically blue and could represent a water course. The other is a lower path, and this one is dark. It sounds like two different ways to Mordor, doesn't it? Okay. Both are mentioned, and they surround the lake of fire, represented as a band of red, or as you saw here, this little square of red. Along both ways are guardians and watchers who test the deceased to see if they are worthy to pass. I actually have the names of some of these guardians, actually 10 of them. Here we go. So you can remember, you can even learn it in the good Egyptian, or if they're, they know the English, this is the way to get across. So just memorize this. So, if you find yourself in the afterlife and want to cross, just keep these in mind. The first one you declare, and their name is the sad-faced one. The second one is he whose face is covered. The third is called dog face. Woof. Number 4 is the scowler. Number 5 is he whose face is hot. Number 6 is he whose face is dreadful. The next one is monster. Next one is she of the knife. The next one is hippopotamus face, bellowing of power. Hippopotamus face. That's good. And finally, he who is driven off with 2 faces in dung. That's right. He was driven off with 2 faces in dung. Well, there you go. Now you got through. You're happy. You got through those gates. There is a break in trials at this point at the field of offerings. Here you prepare to have a meal with Osiris. That's good, right? They are here. You're granted some fine clothing, emblems of authority. Then after that, after this time, a little meal with Osiris, then you enter again the dark realm of Rustau, which is a wide hall divided in 3 sections with flaming walls. As they're going through this great hall, they are observed by watchers, but they are also protected at this point by Thoth. At the end of the hall, there happens to be all these sky symbols representing the horizon. Isn't that interesting? So go through. Now, there is, as you go through, there is a maze of winding pathways, but these pathways are represented in this image that you're going to be moving through, which is, of course, the path of the sky. And, of course, now you have your spell 1072. So you have your handy dandy. Well, it's your coffin text. So you got to kind of open your eyes a little bit, peek, cheat sheet right there on the side of your coffin. Okay, I got this. Could you imagine that? Here you thought your work was over to memorize things, and now you die, and you're gonna sit in this coffin, and you got to memorize all these things, all these magic words and rites. You got more homework to do. I thought you got out of homework. Can you imagine if you didn't do your homework? I mean, you can't really cheat and open up your eyes and take a peek at the side of your coffin, or crypt notes, in your in your book of the dead. You're going to be stuck. Okay, so memorization, my friends, memorization. So this is what you have to say. The paths here are in confusion. Every one of them is opposed to their fellow. It is those who know them who will find their paths. They are high on the flint walls, which are in Rustel, which is on both water and on land. And then, of course, follows various rituals, which I, don't have time to tell you about. Rusto, by the way, is filled with angry gods, demons. Some demons have the heads of scarabs. Others have hold lizards or serpents in their hands. Here's one is called this. This is the whole name of one of them. He who eats his fathers, who eats his mothers, he who dries off set when he is angry. It's a long name. By the way, it is interesting to add, because you're here, that this underground realm was known as Nerit, meaning underside. And so some of the Egyptians believed that everybody was upside down. It was upside down world. And that seems okay, right? Upside down world. But somehow in their minds, upside down means even aspects of their bodies are upside down. So that means that their mouths were down in their lower nether parts, and their buttocks was above, if that makes any sense. This is why there's a lot of names that refer to eating of, anyway, that's why. It's the Egyptian minds, it's their imagination. But yeah, upside. By the way, this idea of imagery, of the upside down imagery, even when it comes to the upper and lower parts, the mouth being traded places with the buttocks opening and so forth. This idea actually goes into medieval imagery of the devil, if you're curious. So if you're wondering where that came from, it comes from. Isn't that fascinating? So everything comes from something else. But now you may recognize it, or with the mouth and in the belly and so forth, right? Okay. Now, eternal life is eventually reached. There's audience with Thoth in the mansion of Ra, and you must, of course, justify that you are worthy before him. Then, if you accept, you may go upon the bark of Ra. So that's good. However, you're not done yet. I know, and this idea keeps going into the later on the Book of the Dead, because now you have to go to 7 gates, each with a guardian. By the way, the third guardian was named he who eats the droppings of his hinder points. So you see that connection, which I talked about earlier? Yeah. Another is called he who lives on maggots. So they have great names. Yeah. Then they meet Osiris, and the Eye of Horus is offered. This is a wadjet, which is a symbol of protection. This is the all-seeing eye. Because one is now, one with Thoth, because remember Thoth is with you, who's described as a son of Horus in this context. What will happen is this idea that you are to be now with Ra. So I actually have a quotation from the coffin text here. As for anyone who knows this spell, he will be like Ra in the east of the sky, like Osiris within another world, and he will go down to the circle of fire. There will never be a flame against him forever. It has happily come to an end. Whew. You got through. You made it. You made the underworld, at least according to the coffin texts. But of course, there's going to be more. Just give me a second here. More. I got so many notes. Too many notes. Okay, now let's go on a little bit here. There is, of course, There's always Ra as the center. There's another quote from about Ra. I'll read this one too. It says, "Hail and peace. I repeat to you the good deeds which my own heart did through me from within the serpent coil in order to silence strife. I made the four winds that every man might breathe in his time. I made the great inundation that the humble might benefit by it like the great. I made every man like his fellow, and it did not command that they do wrong. It is their hearts which disobey what I have said. I have created the gods from my sweat and the people from the tears of my eyes." So you have this very empathetic kind of Ra, but at the same time, he's basically saying it's not my fault you're bad. So anyway, but I still care for you guys. Common text 1031 has the deceased say as follows. They say, "I shall sail rightly in my bark. I am Lord of eternity in the crossing of the sky." Wait, what happened? How are they Lord of the eternity? "I am not afraid in my limbs, for who and hic overthrow for me the evil being. I shall see light land, I shall dwell in it." What's going on here? "Make way for me, that I may see Nun and Alman, for I am that Ak." Remember what Ak is? Remember the Ak, the combination of the Ba and Ka, "who passes by the guards. I am equipped and effective at opening his portal. As for any person who knows the spell, he will be like Ra in the eastern sky. Like Osiris in the underworld, he will go down the circle of fire without the flame touching him forever and ever." So what's happening is through this ritual of descent and ascent, the deceased is taking on aspects of being Osiris and Ra. And so this is, in a sense, a form of deification that's going on through this magical act, going through all these trials. So it is not all for naught, but it doesn't seem like a very easy job, right? So we're on to the other side, right? Now we go finally to the Book of the Dead. See how this all leads to here? Book of the Dead just simply getting written down. The Egyptian Book of the Dead becomes a very popular text by the beginning of the New Kingdom. This is the journey of the soul after death. And of course, it goes through, they're not known for their uniformity, of course. Various subjects are talked about and magical spells. The Book of the Dead was first put together in Thebes toward the beginning of the Second Intermediate Period, around 1700 BCE. The first one is by Queen Menhotep. I'm not sure if I have her image. I think I don't have that one. Don't worry about it. She was the wife of the pharaoh Djibouti. That's too much. Okay. So what happens here is that by the 17th century, the Book of the Dead had become widespread, not only for members of the royal family, but courtiers and many others, officials and so forth. They're moving now from papyrus to linen, and so this linen being wrapped around the deceased. By the time we get to the New Kingdom, you have various spells, like, for example, the weighing of the heart spell is first known during the reign of Hatshepsut and Tutmos III. Spell 125, and let's go to an image now. So this is the weighing of the heart. So spell 125 concerns the weighing of the heart in the afterlife. It begins with the god Osiris, who is sitting under a canopy, and he wears a elaborate Atef crown. He holds a crook and flail. He wears white linen overlaid with a pattern of feathers. Both his hands and face are covered with gold foil. In some versions, this is Horus. Before him, of course, you have the four sons of Horus. Before Osiris, sitting on a giant lotus. And of course, you have these are connected to the canopic jars. Now, from this period onward, as I said, now we're going to have the different forms, but especially during the 19th century, 19th dynasty. I want to, forgive me, I really want to focus in on the 19th dynasty because we have the best representation of a book of the dead that I really want to go over in detail. Is that okay? So let's dive into it. I know that we can go through. I'll talk about other books of the dead, but it's good to have one firmly in mind so we can follow along. Okay, hope that helps. So we're going to be talking about the tomb of Ani, and so this dates from the 19th dynasty, so around 1250 BCE. Includes a very curious papyrus manuscript, cursive hieroglyphs discovered in 1888 in Luxor. It is, I think it is, the finest example of any Book of the Dead. So you're going to see images from it. Now, let's go to the next picture. There's a story, of course, to it, and it connects to a guy by the name of E.A. Walter Budge. You see, he saw and purchased this manuscript, but before he was able to take it into his possession, well, the police rounded up all the antiquities dealers in the area, or that particular area. And then the police sealed up their merchandise in their houses. So what Budge did is he offered the guards a nice fine meal while the locals dug beneath the wall of the house to retrieve the manuscript. So there you have that. Let's go to the next image. In structure, beautiful. In structure, it opens with hymns, praises of Kurt Nitter, which means, of course, the underworld. Also, the seven arets, pylons of the house of Osiris, speeches, and so forth. You're going to hear Osiris is esteemed as the greatest of gods, and so is worthy of judging humanity. Also, he was once understood as a human, a righteous one, was betrayed by Set, dismembered, but restored. None of his parts experienced a putrefaction, excuse me, and so that gave him a leg above the rest. Now, Ani, seen here, there he is, who's a scribe, asked the question to Tem, who's identified as Ra at this time. And he says, how long have I to live? By the way, these images are connected to what I'm talking about. So I just kind of want you to know that's why you're seeing this image here on this particular manuscript. So how long have I to live? Tem responds, millions of years, a period of 1,000,000 years. So for human life, we go on forever, according, the soul keeps on going. The scribe Ani's Book of the Dead opens with him depicted with hands raised in adjuration right here. He stands before a table of offerings. Take a look at the offerings there. You got beef, you got loaves of bread, you got cake. You look closely, you got vases of wine, and oil. You got fruits. I think I see some flowers there. There's a lotus. Ani here is wearing a saffron-colored linen garment. He's got a nice wig there, necklace, bracelets. His wife, who is shown throughout this entire piece, is standing behind him. She's described as the lady of the house, the lady of the choir of Amun, as an Amun-Ra. She's dressed the same way as her husband. Her name is Tutu. That's a kind of cute name, Tutu, right? Thu. She holds a sistrum and branch in her right hand and a manat in the other. By the way, a manat, if you're wondering what a manat is, this is a ceremonial object associated with the goddess Hathor. It has strings of beads attached to a disc. When shaken, of course, the beads will then make a rattling sound. Excuse me. Following this, let's go to the next image, is a hymn in praise to Ra when he rises in the eastern part of heaven. We will examine this later. You have here a depiction of the disk of the sun. See that there? And there is a pair of arms rising from the Ankh, which is the representation of life. So the Ankh is reaching out, life. Hence, Ra, the sun, equals life. Now, the Tet stands upon the horizon. By the way, a Tet, this is the knot or girdle of Isis, which is connected to welfare and life. There are 3 dog-headed apes, and they happen to be raising their arms to the disc. They happen to be representations of the spirit of the dawn. On the right side is the goddess Nephthys. This is the daughter of the sky goddess Nut and the earth god Geb. We saw them earlier. And she is the deity over death and mourning and the afterlife. She is also charged with watching over mummified bodies and guiding the deceased into the afterlife. On the left side, of course, you see there's Isis, goddess of life, healing, protection, and magic. Now, this vignette is intended to accompany the hymn to the rising sun. Next, of course, follows the hymn to Osiris of the weighing of the heart ceremony. And we'll take a look at this here. So Ani and his wife, they are on, actually, this is an earlier image. They're on the right. Let's go to the next image, see if it shows them. No, go back. Sorry. So it was an earlier image that had them, but we did see that earlier. There we go. Ani and his wife right there. They are observing the scene right here. Right. And before them happens to be, thank you so much, Margie. Before them is a heart weighed against the feather. You see above the abode of the 12 gods. You also see Anubis, right? Anubis here, who is working the scales. He's jackal-headed. The inscription above it reads, "He who is in the tomb say, pray thee, O waiter of righteousness, to guide the balance that it may be established." Facing Anubis is a representation of Ani's luck or destiny. So see that little guy right there? That's a shape. That's a representation of the deceased's luck, good luck. He got a good luck charm as a little body. It's a little body there, which kind of reminds me of the idea of the soul there, right? Okay, and then of course behind are the goddesses Miskenet, which is interesting. You see Miskenet, who's over the birth chamber, and Rinanet, who's over rearing children. Now, I don't know, but I think that's interesting. The question I have to ask, and Egyptologists kind of puzzle about this is about the weighing of the heart ceremony. This is about death. This is about resurrection. How come then you have a goddess that's connected to birth and childhood right there behind? Yes, absolutely. Many Egyptians did believe in reincarnation, and perhaps this is connected with it. By the way, you also see this human-headed bird. We know what this is, right? We talked about this. This is Ani's soul. So that as a bird right there. Okay, now above are the 12 gods. You got Harmachis, who's a great god with his boat. You got Tamu, Shu, Tefnut, who is described as Lady of Heaven, Seb, Nut, Lady of Heaven, Isis, Nephthys, Horus, described as the great god here, Hathor, the Lady of Amenta, and Sa. So there you have the deities that are standing above. By the way, behind Anubis is Thoth, the scribe of the gods and wisdom. And you can see here he has a reed pen with both black and red ink, intended to record the results of the trial. Okay, thank you, Margie. We can go now to further, go back again to the later image. So here we go. You can see Thoth a little better there. Behind Thoth is Ammon or Amit. Ammon means the devourer. Amit means eater of the dead. Either way, you have a representation waiting to eat the souls if that person should not be good. Right? So what happens now is, let's go to B for a second, is Ani declares. He declares at this moment, he says, my heart, my mother, my heart, my mother, my heart, my coming into being. May there be nothing to resist me at my judgment. May there be no opposition to me from Chacha. What's that? I'll define. Chacha is basically, these are the four gods of the cardinal points, Meshta, Hapi, Tutmateri, and Quipsinef. And the idea is no opposition from the four corners, the four directions of the earth, right? May there be no parting of me from my presence of him who keeps the scales. Thou art my ka within my body that knits and strengthens my limbs. Again, we know what a ka is. May you come forth to the place of happiness to which I am advancing. May the Shinnet not cause my name to stink. May the Shinnet not cause my name to stink. And may no lies be spoken against me in the presence of the gods. The Shinnet are a class of divine beings who are kind of part of nature, so we don't want them to make your name stink. Your name stinks. Well, it's not going to work out then, right? Next, Ani is brought before Osiris. Let's go to the next image. Here we got Horus. The hawk head is shown holding Ani's hand and bringing him to the king of the underworld. And of course, by the way, Horus is wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. As for Osiris, let's go to the next image, which is connected to this one. He is described as the Lord of Eternity. He is housed in what resembles a funerary chest. He wears the Atef crown with plumes. A Manat hangs from the back of his throne. By the way, this is a necklace associated with Hathor and represents good luck and fortune. He holds a crook, scepter, and flail, which of course connects to his sovereignty. We saw this. He's wrapped in bandages. There are the four children of Horus do face him. Behind him are Nephthys on the left and Isis on the right. And of course, lotus pillars support the building. So Ani is now merging at this point with Osiris. He's merging. So he's becoming one, according to this document. So in fact, he's now called Osiris Ani. All right. So I guess we can see me for a few moments. Osiris Ani. So what does he say? He declares, "O Lord, omnipotent," which means the underworld, "I am in thy presence. There is no sin in me. I have not lied wittingly." Maybe you did. Okay. "Nor have I done aught with a false heart. Grant that I may be like those favored ones who are round about you, and that I may be an Osiris, greatly favored of the beautiful God and beloved of the Lord of the world, the royal scribe indeed, who loves Ani, triumphant before the god Osiris." So lots of love going on here as you're becoming Osiris's love. In a sense, you can see here, and your love for Osiris from this quotation is bringing them together, right? But you always have the sense of honesty, of truth. But at the same time, you still have this idea, one who loves Ani. So there is These are not necessarily always, in many cases, you have these gods who don't show a lot of love. The funny thing is, yeah, these gods can be wrathful and kind of scary at times, but they can be very loving at times too. We see that quite clearly. We'll have other examples in these works. What follows is an elaborate funeral procession scene to the tomb. And of course, you have of interest here. I'll just show you one of the images here that I find is fascinating. And that is I'll show a few. You have the professional female mourner. And so this is of interest, right? So the idea is that these all over the ancient Middle East and even mentioned in the Bible, you have this idea of these women who are hired to mourn, and through their weeping, in a sense, it brings sympathy by others and gentleness. So this is not looked at as just simply acting out a ritual. It is believed to really be mourning this person's death, and it helps others be able to mourn as well. They are helpers. So anyway, let's go to the next image. Then we have the opening of the mouth ceremony. Anubis right here, of course. Maybe this is that's fine. The other image disappeared, but that's fine. So what happens here is Anubis is behind him. His wife is mourning, but this is actually another image from another another text. I don't know what happened to it, but that's fine. But in the other one, there indeed Ani and his wife. She's weeping below, and so there we are. So basically, and in the end, the two are shown. Let's go to the next image. There we go. And in the end, I like this one. There's an image here at the end with Ani with his wife. Now, whether this is the afterlife together, I think it is. Remember, he loves his wife. It's interesting. You see this all the way through, and you have an image that wasn't able to be seen, but it is an image that shows her really holding on to his body and weeping. She is missing him. We also see interwoven throughout this text that she is included in all the imagery. She's somewhere right by his side. So it goes to show that, well, she should be at the very end too. So this is I love this image because you see Ani with his wife in a Senate, in a special hall, and he's sitting here. He's playing a game. It's a board game. It's called Senate, the Senate Net Hub. It's called the game of passing through. And so the idea is to get your marker to pass through to the other side, much like in life and death, right? So the idea here, of course, the soul of Ani and his wife stand upon a pylon-shaped building right in front of them. There they are. And of course, the hieroglyphs by Ani's side says the soul of Osiris on it. So the idea is here you are, a husband and wife, apparently in the afterlife, living happily ever after, with their two little souls perched there right before them. Beautiful imagery, and really just a marvelous, great piece of work that I just love it. So it's one of my favorite ones here. Okay, so where do we go from here? Sorry, I get kind of a little bit misty eyed. Actually, let's go to the next image. There's another image there here. So now this is another one that we're talking about. So from what happens here is that we go into the third. Actually, we'll put this down temporarily. So then what happens is, we'll just kind of round this up. There is what's called the third intermediate period. So, which is from 1069 to 664. The Book of the Dead starts to appear in hieroglyphic script, in addition to the traditional hieroglyphs. The hieratic scrolls basically were a cheaper version. Sometimes they lack illustrations, or they do just one or two. But what's happening here is the Book of the Dead is becoming more popular, but the versions are becoming smaller and cheaper. Isn't that humanity for you, right? Just getting worse, right? And they have actual substitutes as well, substitute texts in addition to during the 25th dynasty, and the 26th also earlier. You have the merging of the standardization. They're all, you know what? We need to make these all kind of more the same. So there's an effort now to make them more homogenous, more the same. So you're getting less of diversity. You're getting basically, I don't know how to say this, but I'm going to say it I'm going to use an ancient illustration, very ancient. Remember the old days, I'll just do this. You're into music and you buy all the separate records and you enjoy the records. And then all of a sudden it gets reduced down to the best of hits. But it's like they keep copying the same thing. That's pretty much it. It becomes the best spells, the best of hits, the summation. And it's kind of like, okay. So they're not as exciting, to be honest. The additional writings that go along with it are exciting, but the standardization, for me, takes the life out of it. You don't get the innovation that you get earlier on, but I'm just biased. But the books that go along with it are pretty cool. The Amduat, which we'll talk about shortly. You have the Book of Breathing and the Book of Traversing Eternity. So these additional books add more. So we not only have the Book of the Dead, which is smaller, it's made cheaper, less pictures, it's standardized, but we also have this new book and that new book, and you need to have those books too to enter into the afterlife. So you got these kind of ideas going on. Okay, so there you have it. At present, in total, you have about 192 spells that are known. The Book of the Dead is made up of, as I said, various individual texts. Most of the subtexts begin with the word ro, which can mean, the word ro can mean mouth or speech or spell or utterance or incantation or chapter of book. It's kind of hard. So you see, with the ancient Egyptians, anything that is said or that is written could generate a magical action. Hence, the natural conclusion is that because the Egyptians spoke every day, and many more of the educated wrote too, magic was intertwined as part of life, not just the elite and priests, but the common people too. In your speech, you got to watch what you say because it has magical powers. The Egyptians believed that. So if you said something crossways or something that's a little strange, for now, we just kind of go, oh, now, not a big deal. For them, it's like, oh, take that back. You just cursed me. No, I didn't mean to curse you, or you just blessed me. Thank you. So words meant more because it's believed they did have actual magic power. Even words in conversations, in just everyday speech, it still has a power. And the merchants know that really well. So when it comes to transactions, they go, oh, the more they talk about it, their product, the more you're interested in that product. You know what? I think a lot of salespeople today have that mentality too, right? It's the idea. It's like, hey, you make that connection, they're interested, and then you talk with them and you lure them. Well, that's believed. The Egyptians would say these business people, these salespeople, they're doing magical practices. For us, we're going, we don't think so. But for them, they did. Now, the Egyptian, of course, obviously healing and protection were priorities. The Egyptian word for magic, by the way, was Heka. And they believed this energy, this force, did indeed create the universe. and then continues to permeate in the universe itself. The word Heka itself means using the Ka, as in He-Ka. Using the Ka, He-Ka. Of course, as we discussed earlier, the Ka is the aspect of a person or even a god that lives on after the body's death. It becomes the Ak. Eventually, Heka becomes deified as a god too, the god of magic and medicine. Now, many of the ancient Greeks will say, will presume that there's a connection between Heka and Hecate. And so there's some linguists in ancient times will make these associations. This is an ancient connection, not a modern one. So I find that still very quite interesting. Now, okay, so we have, of course, some spells that are connected to the various gods. For instance, spell 17 is pretty obscure and lengthy. It describes the god Atun. It goes into that. And of course, this is a spell that describes the sun's journey as it moves in the underworld and then ascends. It represents rebirth and renewal. Those who read, I am the great God who came into being himself, would then imagine themselves on such a journey, and not just imagine, but believe, and that they in turn become that God. So you cannot understand much of Egyptian magic as it relates to the afterlife without understanding the idea that you are connecting with these gods. You are becoming an aspect of that God. And through that, you gain salvation. The most important part of the Book of the Dead were spells that, of course, enable the deceased to cross safely into the underworld, as we saw. You, in a sense, are required to awake. If successful, the gods, demons, and spirits of the underworld will be properly pleased, repulsed, or appeased via the selection of power words that you decide to use, and so that the soul may reach the way into the heart ceremony. So you have that. Okay. Also, I want to mention the fact that at first, when it comes to the Book of the Dead, we found during the period of the New Kingdom, 10 copies belonged to men for every one of women. Okay, this is during the New Kingdom. So for every 10, you find what. However, when we enter the third intermediate period, it moves into 2/3. So it changes quite a bit. So what will happen is as we move into the third intermediate period and beyond, more and more women are connecting to the Book of the Dead, and they too will have them in their tombs. We talked about the various dimensions. We don't have to go into detail about that so much. Okay, so okay. So now let's go to this next image. I like this version of the 15th chapter of the Book of the Dead. That was go to the last one. But thank you. Yeah, that's good. Interred with Ani from the 19th dynasty, 1250. I just think that this is an interesting description. Again, this is a hymn of praise to Ra when he rises in the eastern part of the heaven. And it goes as follows. Behold, Osiris Ani the scribe, who records holy offerings of all the gods, who says, homage to thee, O thou who hast come as Khepra, Khepra, the creator of the gods. Thou risest, thou shinest, making bright thy mother Nut, crowned king of the gods. Thy mother Nut does homage unto thee, and both her hands. The land of Manu receives thee with content, and the goddess Mot embraces thee at the 2 seasons. May he give splendor and power and triumph and a coming forth resurrection as a living soul to see Horus of the 2 horizons, to the Ka of Osiris, the scribe Ani triumphant before Osiris, who says, "Hail, all ye gods of the temple of the soul, who weigh heaven and earth in the balance, and who provide food and abundance of meat. Hail, Tatanum, one creator of mankind and the substance of the gods of the south and the north, of the west and the east. Ascribe you praise unto Ra, the Lord of heaven, the prince, life, health, strength, the creator of the gods, and adore you him in his beautiful presence, as he riseth in the Atat boat. They who dwell in the heights and they who dwell in the depths worship you. Toth and Mot, both are thy recorders. Thine enemy is given to the fire. The evil one hath fallen. His arms are bound. His legs hath Ra taken from him. The children of impotent revolt shall never rise again." And you know, you're reading this, and you're thinking, okay, so why are you reading this to us? Why is this important? Let's look at me for a few seconds. Do you see anything similar here? How does it read? It reads very much like the Hebrew Bible. You start going, oh, wait a second. I can see it. The same kind of descriptive ideas that we see woven within the Hebrew Bible, you're seeing here. And as a result, many scholars go, whoa, we're seeing, I know a lot, we don't see it because we're not exposed to it, but Egyptologists are, and they look at many of these texts connected to Ra, and they go, whoa, these are pretty close to the El Yahweh at times, even the same way a conversation, the same kinds of ideas, loving but still fierce, the same, I love you, but I'm gonna do all these things to you too. But and you can see it's kind of eerie at times. And you got to realize that this work is during the time of the New Kingdom. And of course, obviously, we have the Habaru and many ideas within Judaism forming at just this exact time. So just kind of throwing that one in, just maybe for fun. I don't know. But let's go to the next image. I just want to say that this is the hymn. We just heard the hymn of praise to Ra when he riseth in the eastern horizon, the Ani version. Ani. I want you to hear the difference now with another version. This is now the Quina version of the same hymn of praise to Ra when he rises in the eastern part of heaven. This is the same one. Yeah. It's a little different in Quina's Book of the Dead. Quina was, by the way, a merchant who lived around 1300 to 1275. His manuscript is quite long, 17 meters long, and is currently in the Dutch National Museum in Leiden. The other one, of course, is in London, right? The British Museum. The text, of course, begins talking about the daily cycles, right? And let's just hear how this one is. And I think you'll hear the difference. He says, it goes as follows: Behold, Osiris, Queen of the merchant, who saith, homage to thee in thy rising, thou Tumu, in thy crowns of beauty. Thou risest, thou Ra shinest, thou shinest at dawn of day. Thou art crowned like unto the king of the gods, and the goddess Shuti doeth homage unto thee. The company of the gods praises thee from the double dwelling. Thou goest forth the upper air, and thy heart is filled with gladness. The Sikhat boat draws near onward as Ra cometh to the haven. In the otter boat and fair winds, Ra rejoiceth, Ra rejoiceth. Thou father is new, thy mother is Nut, and thou art crowned Ra Harmachis. Thy sacred boat advances in peace. Thou foe hath cast down, his head hath been cut off. The heart of the lady of life rejoice, and the enemy of her Lord hath been overthrown. The mariners of Ra have content of heart, and Anu rejoice. It's completely different. I mean, there's certain ideas that are there, but I want you to understand, until we get later on, intermediate period, the third intermediate, you're going to have these really very different texts. Because what happens is, I like this, it's like what they would do is they would cater your Book of the Dead to who you are and your personality. It was made just for you. So they'll leave out parts, they'll put new stuff in, and so it was catered to you if you could afford it. So I like that, right? So it's not just a generic Book of the Dead, it's a Book of the Dead that fits whoever it is. So if the person happens to be a merchant, you'll have imagery connected to a merchant. If a person happens to be a fisherman, does that make sense? You're going to have changes based upon the profession or what they enjoy or what they like to do. In the case of Ani, he likes to play board games, right? So it is, and I think that's refreshing. Sorry, I had to quote that so you kind of understand that there is a context here that is different. Let's go to the next image. So by the way, Ra is described as being reborn every morning on the horizon. Each night, the sun unites with Osiris in this particular manuscript. Quina, he hopes he may do the same via his ritual of sympathetic magic. The manuscript provides the names of those who he may traverse through the dark realm. In fact, he specifically gives the names of each one. And so there you have it. So I find that's interesting. Okay, let's go to the next image. Let's go to the next one after this one. This next one is Neket. Neket was a royal scribe and a general living at the end of the 18th dynasty. And so earlier than the manuscript of both Ani and Quina, this hymn to Ra is very beautiful. And it is a nice example of devotion. So it goes as follows. This is rather, so I'm going to read this one here. You can see, Carl, obviously you got Ra here. It's a hymn of praise to Ra by Neket, the royal scribe, captain of soldiers, who says, "Homage to thee, O glorious being, thou who art provided with all things. O Timu Huru Kuti, when thou risest in the horizon of heaven, a cry of joy comes out of the mouth of all people. O thou beautiful being, thou dost renew thyself in thy season in the form of the disk within thy mother Hathor. Therefore, in every place, every heart swells with joy at thy rising forever." I'm going to stop there for a second. The tenor of this particular hymn is full of joy, of happiness. I am going to read the rest of it because I want you to understand that it's not all fire and brimstone. I gave you those two earlier examples to show, well, there's this conflict going on here, but it's not always the case. This is a great example of it. I'm going to keep going because I got to keep going so you have enough in your mind to know, right? The eastern and western parts of heaven come to you with homage and giving forth sounds of joy at thy rising. O Ra, thou who art Haru Kutu, the mighty man-child, the heir of eternity, self-begotten and self-born, king of earth, prince of the netherworld, governor of the mountains of Akut, thou dost rise in the horizon of heaven and sheddest upon the world beams of emerald light. Wow. Thou art born from the water, thou art sprung from new, who fostereth thee and ordained thy members. O thou who art crowned king of the gods, God of life. Now get this, God of life, Lord of love. Ra is Lord of love. All the nations live when thou dost shine. The goddess Nut does homage unto thee. The goddess Mut embraces thee at all times. They who are in thy following sing unto thee with joy and bow down to the earth when they meet thee, the God of heaven, the Lord of earth, the King of right and truth, the God of eternity, the everlasting ruler, the Prince of all the gods, the God of life, the creator of eternity. The gods rejoice at their rising. It goes on and on. It's beautiful. This is a different kind of idea. You do not see this very often in Mesopotamia. I'm sorry. You don't see this very often in Sumer. You don't see this in Babylon, this kind of love and nurturing. But you see this in Egypt. this idea of loving deities is commonplace for the Egyptians. Many of them actually do love their gods. They just do. They don't just only fear them, they love them too. That's different. That's a innovation in many ways in this particular region. That's a gift that the Egyptians give to us. Isn't that fascinating? Now, the papyrus also contains spell 110, which is basically addressed to a series of deities who live in the next world. The field of offerings, the field of rushes. The image that accompanies the spell shows Nok with Thoth. Well, we just showed, don't worry about it. And of course, moving across. Let's move on. I'm skipping stuff. It's all so good, but I got something I got to show you. Now, there's more to this. In the Book of the dead were taken into the presence of the god Osiris. Follow me. Who was confined to subterranean duet. There's various spells that enable the Ba or Ka to join, of course, Ra, the Bach. But there's something else. There is, of course, you're going to take somebody with you. You see, when you go to the field of reeds, by the way, it's interesting, reeds. My name is Rietveld, which means field of reeds in Dutch. Hey, maybe, heavenly, right? It's a heavenly name. Anyway, what happens is the field of reeds is pleasant. It's plentiful. But you got manual labor that's required. So you got to have somebody to help you out, right? Let's enter the next image. These statuettes were inscribed with the spell, also included in the Book of the Dead, requiring them to undertake any manual labor that might be, that the owner of it wants them to do. So the idea is that you take these images that you see here, and it is believed that when you die, after the opening the mouth ceremony, when you get to this great field of reeds, you have these figures that are in your tomb, and aspects of you will be connected to these images, and your name will be on these images, and through magic, those images or statuettes in your tomb will be transplanted or moving into the realm of the spirit, into the realm of reeds to do your labor for you. Got it? Yeah, well, close it down. Like this one. That's right. This is a real Yeshabadis figure. It's only 3,000 years old, too. Very new. Hi, how you doing there? The Yeshabadis figure here. So what will happen here is this Yeshabadis figure. So let's say, something happens, and you're going to make sure you bury me with this guy. And what happens is that when I die and I cross over and I go to the field of reeds, aspects of me is connected here. You see, what happens is that my name, because these are called answerers, my name is placed upon this. And in some cases, the spell from the Book of the Dead. And so what happens is that these, even though they're in the tomb with me, in the afterlife, they come alive and they do all my chores for me. They clean the house. Not as successful as they should be. Thanks. They do your, they do your dishes, maybe, right? They take care of your farm. They do so you don't have to do all the physical labor. You got to use Yeshabadis figure. The problem with this one is that somebody intentionally wiped out the name of this Yeshabadis, the name of the person who owned it. Do you see the remnant of the cartouche? See it? and see how the name is gone, the hieroglyph name. So somebody took this and chipped it off. When this happened, well, even though this has been identified by Claremont Graduate University, I do own this one legally as from the time of the Bronze Age. We have found iron deposits in these little holes. So that means that later on, somebody found this little figure and took it out of it where it's supposed to go, took it out, maybe from the grave, maybe grave robbers. And then they intentionally took off the back part, cleaned it all up, and rededicated it. And what they did is then they pounded iron nails in different parts, probably rededicated to somebody else. And this acted like a voodoo doll. So you can see where the holes are, the holes in the eye, the mouth, the throat, the legs. They're pretty angry. However, nothing in the heart. Isn't that sweet? They want them to live. So anyway, but there you have it. You see an actual Ushabtis figure right here. I'm hoping that sometime I'll come home and the whole house is all cleaned up. And every now and then, there's this little thing that kind of goes like this, just I don't worry too much about it. Only I can have that kind of terrible humor. Okay, so there you have it. Ushabtis figure up and personal. Okay, so what will happen now is that, of course, you have the opening of the mouth ceremony, right? Which, of course, is a ritual that's performed so that the person who died could eat and drink again in the afterlife. The ritual caused the deceased to remember his name after death. The name, of course, was regarded as a vital part of being. It begins, I have put my name in the upper Egyptian shrine. I have made my name to be remembered in the lower Egyptian shrine. On this night of counting the years and of numbering the months, and it goes on. Next, the ritual helped to preserve the dead person's heart and the heart's role in unifying with the person's body and soul. It prevented the heart from betraying its owner at the weighing of the heart ceremony. So we have that, kind of abbreviating things here. You also have in the Book of the Dead, contains a spell which the deceased may use on themselves for the opening the mouth ritual. It says, my mouth is opened by Ptah. My mouth bonds are loosed by my city god. Thoth has come fully equipped with spells. He looses the bonds of Seth from my mouth. Atum has given me my hands. They are placed as guardians. My mouth is given to me. My mouth is opened by Ptah. With that chisel of metal with which he opened the mouth of the gods, I am Sekhmet Wadjet, who dwells in the west of heaven. I am Sayet amongst the souls of An. So this is kind of the spells that you say upon yourself to help you open up your mouth. And so we move on. You're thinking, okay, so, all right. So we have the weighing of the heart. That's great. Is there more? Of course there's more. So what happens is, remember we talked about those gates, those pylons, all the way back with the coffin texts had to pass through. Remember we saw that again? So the pyramid text and the coffin text, well, guess what? Yep, it's going to happen again for the Book of the Dead. And so you have the first, we're called the 7 gates of Osiris. So basically you have to go through these gates. I actually have portions of the Book of the Dead here. I'm going to get you through right now. So let's see an image of the first 7 books of the gates and see what happens. Okay, here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hey, looks like 7 gates to me. That's right. This is from that wonderful manuscript of Ani, and you can see there are 7 gates there. Very rarely do people see these together with a talk. I think this is kind of too cool. A great illustration. The first is the seven gates. One must pass through to reach this final kingdom. The Egyptians believed that the kingdom of Osiris was divided into seven gates or areas, sometimes 10, 14, 16, or even 21. All seven gates were protected by three gods: a doorkeeper, a watcher, and a herald who interviewed the visiting soul. This sounds like a great video game, by the way. I'm just saying, going through the seven gates. If you want to make a buck, that's an idea right there. So what happens is the deceased had to know, of course, the names of all three deities, as well as to spell and to convince them of his or her good faith. So we see, of course, Ani and his wife will approach. So let's go to the next one. As they're approaching the gate. See, there they are. There's Ani and his wife, because he always has his wife with him. I love that. Yep, always by his side there. And so what happens is that of course they have you have here that you have of course the various gods and so forth. Let's go to the next image. Oh yeah, we're going to show that in just a few. I like that. Let's keep it there. I want to see Ani and his wife a little bit more. That's kind of close up there. Okay, so these gates are called arets. So the first aret, the name of the doorkeeper is Seket Hara Ashet Aru, which means reversed of face and many forms. And then, of course, the next is name, the watcher is Metiheh, and the name of the herald is Hakiru, which means the voice that travels. And so, of course, you're supposed to say special words. I will give you an example of the first one. I won't read every one, or we'll be here till 3 o'clock in the morning. But he says, saith Ani triumphant when he comes to the first aret, I am the mighty one who createth his own light. He creates his own light. I have come unto thee, O Osiris, and purified from that which defiled thee. I adore thee. Lead on. Name not the name of risk thou unto me. Homage to thee, O Osiris, in thy might and thy strength. In Ra Astu, rise up and conquer, O Osiris and Aptu. Thou goest around about heaven. Thou sailest in the presence of Ra. Thou seest all beings who have knowledge. Hail Ra, who circles the sky. Verily I say unto thee, O Osiris, I am a godlike ruler. So he's a godlike ruler. Let me not be driven hence, nor from the wall of burning coals. I have opened the way in Stau. I have eased the pain of Osiris. I have embraced that which the balance hath weight. I have made a path for him in the great valley, and it has made a great path. Osiris shineth, etc., etc. You get the idea. So this kind of thing is said all the time. Okay, so moving right along, you have a second aret, and you have, of course, the gatekeepers there. Then you have the third aret. This is interesting. One is called Q Ha Unt Koti, which means eater of his own filth. I think we've come across this one before. You have Seres Hra. This is the watcher, making to lift up his face. And you have another one here. Let's see. Oh, known as Ah. That's in our phonetic spelling, A, which means the great one. Ah. So there you, I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, you have the fourth aret. You have the fifth. So you go through these arets, and the fifth one's called Akfe, which means he who lives upon worms. So you go to the sixth aret, you go to the seventh aret, and you say these various words. And then from there, you go to pylons. Now, these pylons, let's go to the next image. There are 10 pylons that connect to the house of Osiris. In some cases, there's 12. And in some cases, they are 21. But you have to go through all of these. It's a long journey. But Ani and his wife, with hands raised in adoration, go forth and they enter into these pylons, these gateways. I'll read just the first one and go on, right? You get the idea. See, the first pylon, the words to be spoken, is that saith Osiris Ani. Notice he's Osiris now, triumphant. Lo, the lady of terrors, with lofty walls, the sovereign lady, the mistress of destruction, who uttereth the words which drive back the destroyers, who deliver from destruction him that travels along the way. The name of the doorkeeper is Nerut. So you're going to be going through these. The second pylon lady, by the way, is Lo, the lady of heaven, the mistress of the world, who devours with fire, the lady of mortals. How much greater is she than all men? It's interesting because if you look through all these, they're all women. The next one is the lady of the altar, right? Who, looks like has a cow-headed deity appearance. The fourth one is Lo, she who prevaileth with knives. You got a hippopotamus one coming up here. For most of them, you have with one exception, most of these are female deities that are shown through the various pylons, and they go on and on. I have the version here that goes to 21 pylons that you have to advance. Let's go to the next image. We're going to be closing up pretty soon. This right here, this is a chapter. This is from put together by Nu, who lived in the 18th dynasty. He was an official from 1550 to 1292, and there's a chapter he has in his Book of the Dead on driving back the slaughters which are performed in Hensu, and he talks about the fact that he says at one point, he says, "I am yesterday, seer of millions of years is my name. I pass along the paths of the divine celestial judges. I am the Lord eternity." And so you have this idea that we live forever, eternal life. I open the door in heaven. I rule my throne. I open the way for the births which take place on this day. I shall not die again. But the idea is that there's this concept that you do live or keep on living. In almost a reincarnation-like conception. Okay, so let's move on. Let's see me for a few moments, and then we're going to wrap things up into the eternal life and what happens at the very end. What's the end of the story? Well, first of all, I want to say that the Book of the Dead also has various remedies, supernatural remedies against various threats, but even natural ones. For example, there's in one of them, a few of them actually, to stop the dead being harmed by crocodiles in the afterlife. So if you're in danger in the afterlife of being harmed by crocodiles, you're supposed to say as follows. It says, "Get back, retreat, get back, you dangerous one. Do not come against me. Do not live by my magic. I love that. Do not live by my magic." It's the idea that it's feeding upon that person, their magic. "May I not have to tell this name of yours to the great God who sent you. Messenger is the name of one, and Betty is the name of the other." The crocodile then speaks. Now, the crocodile, there's a time for the crocodile to speak. I don't think there's any crocodile tears. I don't know. "Your face belongs to righteous," says the crocodile. "The sky encloses the stars. Magic encloses its settlements, and my mouth encloses the magic which is in it. My teeth are a knife. My tusks are the viper mountain." The deceased replied then to this. So now you're talking back to the crocodile in the afterlife. "Oh, you with the spine who would work your mouth against the magic of mine, no crocodile which lives by magic shall take it away." The deceased then takes on the identity of Ra and drives back 8 crocodiles with a spear, saying, "Get back, you crocodiles of the west, who lives in the unwearying stars. You detest my belly, for I have absorbed the power of Osiris. I am Seth. Get back, you crocodiles of the west. The now snake is in my belly, and I have not given myself to you. Your flame will not be on me." So watch out. You're protected, by the way, from crocodiles. There's even protection against snakes. This is, oh, Reiki snake, take yourself off, forgive, protects me. Get up, for you have eaten a mouse, which Ra detests, and you have chewed the bones of a putrid cat. So this is how you get rid of those supernatural snakes on the other side. And then, of course, you do have others. You also have, I want to mention that you have to say, you think you're over yet, but there's more, because after you've gone through all this, then of course now it's in different orders. Now you have the weighing of the heart ceremony in so many of these contexts. It's like, yeah. So what happens is, what they will do is, some of the collections are not in order. So it's like, let's have the weight right in the beginning, and then you have the gates later on that leads back up to the but chronology is not always the most important thing. The idea is, and this is fascinating, ancient humanity thinks that sometimes the most important ideas should go first, the essentials. Now think about this. If you are studying for a test, don't you go for the most essential parts first? And then you get the miscellanea? It's just the way things are. The weighing of the heart ceremony apparently is just a big deal. And then you get that out of the way, and then it kind of goes on, and then you go back to repetition. This is the fun of the ancient manuscripts. But before you have this weighing of the heart in this version, you have to make negative confessions. Negative confessions? Yeah. So before the weighing of the heart, remember those people are kind of shaking in their boots, worried that their heart is righteous or not? Well, so you have to make these negative confessions. So here's an example of a few negative confessions. You say, I have not committed, this is actually from the Ani Papyrus. I have not committed sin. I have not committed robbery with violence. I have not stolen. I have not slain men and women. Interesting, men and women. So that's good. I mean, I know it sounds kind of strange, but that's a good thing. So it's inclusive, because a lot of societies is just men. Just saying, right? This is ancient times. I have not stolen grain. I have not purloined offerings. You're hungry. There's an offering there. No, don't take it. I have not stolen the property of the gods. I have not uttered lies. I have not carried away food. Seems to be a lot of food ones here. I have not uttered curses. I have not committed adultery. I have made none to weep. I have not eaten the heart, which means I have not grieved uselessly. I have not attacked any man. I am not a man of deceit. I have not stolen cultivated land. I have not been an eavesdropper. I have not slandered. I have not been angry without just cause. I have not debauched the wife of any man. Kind of sounds like the 10 Commandments a little bit there, right? I have not debauched the wife of any man. That's a repeat. Number, I love it. 20, 20, and 21 are repeat. But it's repeated to a different God. But the idea is just don't do it. I have not polluted myself. I have not terrorized none. I have not transgressed the law. I have not been wroth. I have not shut my ears to the words of truth. I have not blasphemed. I am not a man of violence. I am not a stir up or strife or disturber of the peace. These aren't too bad. I have not acted or judged with undue haste. I have not pried into matters. There's a lot of them connected to eavesdropping. I have not multiplied my words in speaking. Don't do that, right? Saying too much. Some people just say too much, like me. I have wronged none. I have done no evil. I have not worked evil magic against the king or blasphemed against the king. I have never stopped the flow of water. Don't stop the flow of water. I have never raised my voice, spoken arrogantly or in anger. I have not cursed or blasphemed God. I have not acted with evil rage. I have not stolen the bread of the gods. There's another repeat there. I have not carried away the kinfu cakes from the spirits of the dead. Yeah, there's people out there you give to your ancestors and spirits, and they see that food there, and they're going, I think I want that for a meal. I have not snatched away the bread of the child, nor treated with contempt the God of my city. I have not slain the cattle belonging to the God. Well, there you go. Right. So don't do any of those. Now, you know it's going to happen, right? A lot of people are going, I'm not sure if we can do all this. I mean, we're pretty good, but so these are almost like the negative version of the Ten Commandments. But anyway, what happens here is they're kind of scared because they said this, it pronounced all this, and now they have to have their heart weighed. So the person's going to be weighed on these scales. So how do we protect ourselves? It's called the heart scarab. What? Oh yeah. So what happens here is that so they're so concerned about the weighing of the heart ceremony. It led to the creation of the heart scarab. Uh, this happened as early as the 13th dynasty. This basically is an amulet that's wrapped up in bandages and buried with the deceased. It represents the heart. It's made out of a green stone. It's intended to prevent the heart from telling its possible crimes. So when it's weighed, this stops it. In fact, inscribed on it, many of them, it says, "Oh, my heart, which I had on earth, do not speak against me concerning what I have done." So there's always a workaround. I love humans, right? There's always a workaround. So you put that in, you put the heart scarab into your tomb, and then when it comes time for your heart to be weighed, no need to worry, because what happens is through magic, anything that is problematic goes on to that. And it's all clear in your heart, and your heart will be light as a feather. You see, for the Egyptians, the heart was the center of thought, of intellect, personality. And as you know, unlike the other internal organs, it was not removed. It stays there. And so what happens, it remains with the body and weighed upon the scales. And as we know, wrong deeds would make it weigh it down, making one heavy-hearted. Good deeds would make the heart light, making one light-hearted. And so don't worry, the handy-dandy heart scarab will take care of you. Just don't forget to put it in there. Now, I want to say, I wonder what happens if your loved one doesn't quite love you enough to add that in there after you're deceased. May think, you know what? He just deserves to not have that in there. He gets to have his heart swollen by a mitt forever and ever for all eternity. So you got to make sure that whoever's in charge, I'm dead serious actually, it's funny. Make sure that whoever's in charge of your burial loves you. And so what will happen in Egypt is they make sure that they have people who take care of that, who they know who are loyal to you. So some cases it'll be kind of an odd situation if nobody likes you. But there you have it. Okay, so what happens now? From there, now of course, once then, of course, you have the weighing of the heart, balanced there, and I know we're moving through this here. Oh, okay. So let's move on to the end of life. So let's just say that you made it. Your heart is light as a feather. It's all good. Your heart scarab worked, or maybe you were just that good to get through all of those, and you are moving on. Now you're going to move on to the land of everlasting joy. Now, of course, obviously, one was born on earth through the benevolence of the gods, and especially there are deities that are known as the seven Hathors. So here's Hathor. Hi. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so seven Hathors. They're worshipped in seven cities: Thebes, Heliopolis, Aphrodisias, Sinai, Mophilis, Herculapius, Keset. Anyway, and so these are there's seven of them, and they are the lady of the universe. That one's called Sky Storm. The next one's called the Hidden One. Next one is You from Chemist. That's her name. You from Chemist. Next one's called Red Hair. The next one's called Bright Red. The next one is Your Name Prevails Over the West. And they're often depicted as 7 cows. They connect to the Pleiades star constellation. So what happens here is that they're the ones that decreed one's fate at birth. So they're the ones that start things out. And so, but the idea is you still have choice, but your fate should be one that's good. Well, the soul then lives hopefully a good life, and then death comes. And this is only, of course, obviously a transition between this realm and the next. And once, of course, you move on from there to the field of reeds. Sometimes this field of reeds is called the field of offerings. And basically, it's a kind of a mirror image of one's life here on earth. But of course, you got to make sure you do your very best. Now, for the Ani papyrus, this was also known as the field of peace. I'm so excited. I only have it in black and white. I have an image of this field of peace, the field of reeds, to show you, and I will describe the iconography. Let's go. Next image. Yay, you can actually see it. Okay, all right. So you can see here is the image of the field of peace, which is crossed over by several streams. You see the streams there? Yep, there it is. Thoth is here with his pen and his palette, and is introducing Ani and his Ka to 3 gods on the upper left-hand side. See the upper left-hand side? And one has the head of a rabbit, one has the head of a serpent, and one has the head of a bull. Together they are called Tauti, which means the company of the gods. Now moving to the right, has Ani on a boat. He carries a table full of offerings. Next, of course, you go further right on the upper register. Ani addresses a hawk standing on a pedestal shaped like a pylon building. It reads, being at peace in the field of peace and having air for the nostrils. So you are living again in actuality. Now, the register below the first line, you have Ani reaping wheat, but here it says Osiris reaps. So he is now one with Osiris, as we talked about before. On the next image, you go to the right, oxen treading out the corn. And then, of course, Ani right there is standing with arms raised in praise. And it's near what's called a Bennu bird. That's an interesting looking bird. Look at that long beak. And what is that behind it, right? What is this bird? Well, this is an Egyptian deity linked with the sun, with creation and rebirth, this particular bird. This bird is a self-created being and it is connected to the actions of Atum. If it actually, at the beginning, it flew over the waters of Nun before creation and then landed on a rock that would then rise into the mountain of the world. So this is a very important bird that you see here. And of course, it does reference the idea of, yes, beginnings. It's the idea that Ani is starting again. Now, he's starting again in this afterlife, and he's living it. But one wonders if it has to also do with maybe eventual rebirth. I don't know, because this is definitely an image connected to an actual rebirth in actuality. So maybe it's hearkening to a future. Next is Ani is shown with a curp scepter and kneeling before 2 vessels. One is red barley and the other is wheat. And it reads, the food of the shining ones. Now, I love this. Did you guys know that you get to become known as the shining ones? That's right. You shine. Go on, right? It can't get better than that. Okay, so you move on to the third register, and you see Ani plowing. But what it refers to is what's going on below the scene on the right. It says the river is 1,000 cubits in length, nor can it be told its width, not existing any fishes, any in it, nor serpent. So it's actually referring to what's going on below there. You see that lake there. Now, what is interesting here is that the next one is you have, of course, this boat. And you can see on the lower register, you see this boat, and it's floating on a stream, but it has steps on it. Each side is shaped like a serpent's head. It has 8 oars. Now, the stream itself is called Ashet Pet, which means the flood of heaven. So this boat is on the flood of heaven. And there are 2 islands here. The second one, do you note, also has, hey, look at that, a flight of steps on it. And of course, the idea is that this is, of course, connected to the idea of moving up. It's connected to the idea of transcendence. But again, there's a mystery here. It reads, the seed of the shining ones, their length is cubits 7, the wheat cubits 3, the blessed dead who are perfected, they reap it. And the realm of the dead is, of course, located here. But you have this ascension. You have these steps. And it's fascinating because you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Look at that. You got 7 steps. So this is part of the mysteries that many scholars like to dive into, but it is the mysteries connected to ascent. We've heard of descent. You descended into the underworld, it descended into another world, and now what's happening is you ascend. Now, which is fascinating is, I'll just say this. Oh, well, I'll tell you more later, but I want to say this. Did you guys know that Egyptians do believe that in some cases you live in this underworld realm? Many Egyptians believe, though, in some cases you don't. You go back into the above world and you live in another kind of above world and you live there in actuality. There's too much evidence for it. So it's not completely confined to this idea of this underworld concept of Hades, where you have, the realm of the blessed and you have, Antarctica on the other side, or you have this idea of, of Sheol, and the place where the worm dieth not, and the place of Abraham's bosom, or you have this idea within Babylonian, this underworld. In some cases, it's an overworld that you return and you come back again. The question is, how do you return? Ani emerges according to this text. I'm going to read it. It says he emerges from the underworld. If anybody says it's not true, Papyrus, Ani, done. And there's one of just so many. Got it? Ani emerges from the underworld, and he arrives in Seket Anuru, and is in peace in the great city wherein are fresh breezes. So let's go to the next image. So he arises into this other realm, and he says, so basically real fresh breezes, real air. He says, let me have power there. Now, a city. Now, here's something else that'll throw your convention off. You've been taught before that it's only a bunch of agrarian stuff, fields of reeds, all rural. You got cities, according to these texts that are there too, populated by the righteous and the gods. You didn't know that? People need to read these things. But he says to the fresh breezes, he says, let me have power there in this realm above the underworld. Let me become strong to plow there. Let me reap there. Let me eat there. Let me drink there. Let me woo there. Oh, yeah. You just can't make this up. Let me do all things there, even as they are done here on earth. Osiris, of course, is being addressed. Ani then states as follows. He says, Seth has carried away Horus to see what is being built in the field of peace. And what is being built? Well, you saw the little staircase. And he speeds up in the air over the divine soul with the egg in its day. He has delivered the innermost part of the body of Horus from the holy ones of Akert. Behold, I have sailed on the lake of peace. And we saw, of course, the lake of peace. Even I, have crowned him in the house of Shu. By the way, Shu is a primordial god connected to peace, the air, and wind, and resides between earth and the sky. He's also known as the pacifier and the calming presence, but once again, a primordial god. This is interesting, right? His starry abode, referring to Shu, renews its youth, renews its youth. Now, what does that mean? Oh, here we go. Renews your youth. So once again, scholars are going, wait, you're becoming young again? Is going to the overworld again? Rebirth? You see where we're going with this, right? You have this power going up, and it's like your youth is, or maybe just become young again. But this idea, but then again, why do you have those goddesses connected to birth at the judgment, sitting behind Ani? Remember, in the judgment area. So these very strange threads. He says, "I have sailed on its lake, that I may come unto its cities." So cities around the lake. "I have drawn nigh unto the city of Hetep." This word translates as the place of peace or contentment. So there's this beautiful city of peace, of contentment. By the way, I've hardly ever heard talks that describe the underworld as much as I've heard this one, to be honest. They keep it vague. I went through all these various books, and I'm going, not a lot there. This is why it's good that I just read the primary sources, right? Okay, so can you guys hear me? I'm seeing like there's a bit where it comes to the sound. Okay. "For behold, I repose at the seasons of Horus. I have passed through the regions of the company of the gods who are aged and venerable. I have pacified two holy fighters, Horus and Seth, who keep ward upon life. I have done that which is right and fair, and I have brought an offering and have pacified the two holy fighters." And he goes on. So he says, "I have knowledge thereof. I have sailed forth on the waters of the lake, that I may come unto the cities thereof. I have powers over my mouth." I'm glad he has powers over his mouth. "Being furnished with charms, let not the fiends get the mastery over me. Let them not have dominion over me. May I be equipped in thy field of peace. What you wish, that shall I do." And of course, so there you have it. So you're going, okay, well, that's pretty cool. Is that it? Well, maybe. What will happen here is a little bit more here, if I can get to it. Okay, here it is. Of course, I want to make sure I do this part, which is the part that everybody loves. You will. You can take down the image. Thank you so much. So what happens here is that one is Egyptians, you are also reunited with your loved ones. According to the Egyptians, your loved ones will be there waiting for you. Now, what I find is fascinating is they'll mention your wife, your kids will be there, but I think you have to wait till they die, but they still will join you, as you saw the imagery of the two together. But Egyptians are Egyptians. So also, they make it very clear that your favorite cat or dog will be also waiting for you. Or your favorite gazelle, they mentioned, or a favorite monkey. Whatever pet you cherished in life will be standing on the shore waiting for you. That's cool. So your family is there, your cat, your dog, your pets. They even mention your favorite tree is going to be there. If you have a favorite tree, it's there. If you had a stream that you loved that ran by your house, that stream will be there for you too. You are to enjoy everything. You get automatically your favorite people without question, your favorite animals, and you even get your most beloved possessions. I guess you could take it with you. So it's all waiting for you, and you have your house there. So you basically get your well-furnished house, all your loved ones, your pets, your favorite tree, your river, your fields. I don't know. That's a pretty cool afterlife. So even though it took you forever to get there, you had to fight to get there. Um, you know, at least, and you're thinking you have to do work. No, that's what those you Shabbos figures are for. They're the ones plowing for you. You know, I don't know. I just think that's interesting. Okay, so what happens? Okay, so I'm going to, of course, obviously close up. What's the legacy? The legacy is that more and more the the Book of the Dead becomes less individualized, more standardized, and there's also a problem. It's a sad one. The nobility don't like it. The nobility don't like the fact that commoners have access to the afterlife so easily. We want to have a special way. So even though they recognize the fact that the Book of the Dead works, it gets you to the underworld, for them, it's kind of like fast track, the freeway. It's kind of like the idea of toll roll. The idea is, we have a way where we can have one just for us, and nobody else can have it. And so what happens is that's called the Amduat. And so what happens is Amenhotep the first, 1526 to 1506. The Amduat is the beginning of this, which means translated that which is in the underworld. Duet. By the way, we use the word duet for the underworld. I'm just gonna play with you a little bit. Did you know that duet only refers to the underworld in the eastern horizon? But the western horizon, it's called the Imhet underworld. So you got the Imhet for the western one, and the duet for the eastern one. Just a little bit of trivia, just to bother people. So now we do have evidence, but it doesn't for Amduat, but back to Amenhotep the first. But the most complete version that we have is from Tutmos the third, which it's later on. Unlike the Book of the Dead, the magical formula of the Amduat follows a basic order, and also, unlike the Book of the Dead, this book was mostly found in tombs of pharaohs and priests and relatives. Let's just take a look at it so you can see what it looks like. And of course, basically, that's cool. Next one, the image. I like that. Yeah, there it is. This work describes in detail the journey of the sun god Ra through the underworld just after the sun sets in the west to just before the sun rises in the east. Of course, the pharaoh was believed to make the very same journey after he died, joining Ra's celestial bards. So the book also marked out Pharaoh's journey after death as well. The underworld here is portrayed as divided into 12 parts, each one then representing an hour of the night. The purpose of the Amduat is to learn the name of each god and each monster in each one of the 12 underworld realms, so that when Ra, along with Pharaoh, encounters them, he can call upon the name of the god specific to that region to help him, and call upon the name of the monster specific to that region to defeat him. The magic of having one's name can invoke, of course, as well as repel, to bring assistance, or potentially to destroy. You can see that, having heard that labyrinth, that Byzantine labyrinth of the Book of the Dead, which seems to be going everywhere, this is systematic. It's clean. It's very well ordered. It's an easy way of doing that, right? So once again, innovation. So the first hour of the night is a time of transition where Ra, as the sun, descends into the western horizon, known as Akhet. In the second hour, Ra encounters the watery world called Werns. This realm of water continues into the third hour, where he encounters the water of Osiris. The fourth region of the underworld arrived at a time during what's called the desert regions of the god of Sokar, the hawk deity. Ra has to navigate a treacherous zigzag path as he drags his snake boat. In the fifth hour, the sun reaches the tomb of Osiris. This is interesting. At the tomb of Osiris, this is covered by a giant pyramid-shaped mound. So above the tomb of Osiris, you have a giant pyramid-shaped mound, and is declared, this pyramid is declared as Isis covering Osiris. You can see an image of this right here, right? Isis is the pyramid that covers Osiris. Over the summit of the pyramid, you have Isis and Nephthys. They're flying about as two kites. These are birds of prey. Beneath the tomb is a great lake of fire, as you can see here, right? During the sixth hour, the soul of Ra, called in this text the Ba, unites with his body, which is the precise moment the sun begins its regeneration, so it may return to the realm above. So this idea of the soul being unified is the very moment where the sun starts to rise again. Yet, of course, what happens, so basically the sun reunites with Osiris within a magic circle created at this time. Yet the journey is far from over, for in the seventh hour awaits the great serpent, Apophis. Remember this? To destroy him, the only way for Ra to defeat Apophis is through the magic of Isis and through the power of Seth. But Seth himself needs to be helped by Serqet. From his tomb, the pharaoh Thutmose III is shown as fighting alongside the gods and goddesses to defeat Apep, the great serpent of chaos. Let's go to the next image. By doing so, of course, they cleared the way for the sun to rise again on the next day. The rebirth of the sun was obviously tied to the resurrection of the pharaoh himself. Once this battle is over, Ra opens the door of the tomb of Osiris in hour 8 and moves again across the desert of Sokar. By hour 9, Ra returns to the realm of water and is immersed in these waters during hours 10 and 11, having the power to regenerate him. Finally, in hour 12, Ra returns to the eastern sky to light the upper world once more. So it is a little easier, it's a little cleaner. Basically, a dipping down with Ra, merging with Osiris, and then ascending again, fighting Apophis, and out, in, out. I mean, there's still challenges, but not quite the same. Well, the Egyptians were not done yet. They also included yet another book. This is the last book we're going over. It's a very short description. So somebody thought, hey, we don't want the Amduat. We want something else. So let's go to the next one. Humanity, I tell you. Okay, so this next one is called the Book of Gates. This dates from the New Kingdom. It describes again the 12 hours of the sun, journeying in the underworld, but focusing on the soul of all people in general. You see what's going on here now? It's like the Amduat says, this is just for us. This is our easy, clean way, says the wealthy people, the nobles. And the common people go, oh, yeah? Well, we can do that too. You got the 12 gates. You gotta love it. Again, so much humanity. So how this works is pretty clear and clean. You have the 12 hours of the sun's journey in the underworld, but it again focuses upon the souls of all people. Here, Egyptians refer to 4 tribes of humanity. First, themselves as the Egyptians. Second, those known as the Asiatics. Third, the Libyans. And fourth, the Nubians. According to this work, the soul was required to pass through a series of gates. This is a little nicer, with each one guarded not by a monster, not by a beast, but by a goddess, who are only special to each gate and are not mentioned in any other context, making them unknown in various ways. You got these goddesses, right? What happens is each of these goddesses wears a 5-pointed star above their heads. Some contend that these goddesses are actually representations of the most prominent stars to appear in the sky during the 12 hours of night, right? How the soul passes through each goddess guarding each gate is known. You basically and proclaim each of their characteristic titles. That's what you do. So you got to just know their title, then you may proceed. Now, if you don't know their title, then you're cast into the lake of fire. But it's still a little nicer. You don't have like three individuals there, you know. You have to know that person's identity, that person's identity, and that person's identity. You don't have, in other cases, these demons and these monsters, these deities with these scary names. Now it's clean. You got these beautiful goddesses. For the first gate, the guardian of the goddess of the first hour of night, the soul proclaims, all those little dark, splitter of the heads of the enemies of Ra. Well, it's enemies of Ra. And so they press on to go on to the second gate and proclaim for the second one, wise guard of the Lord. The next there follows, the third goddess is the one who cuts through. The fourth is the one of great power. The fifth is she who is on her boat. The sixth is successful leader. The seventh is one who repels a serpent. The eighth is lady of the night. The ninth is she who is in adoration. The 10th is the one who beheads rebels. The 11th is the star who repels rebels. And finally, the 12th is the witness to Ra's magnificence. You know what? This is a glass half full kind of going into the underworld. You know, most of these are very positive attributes, are going against that which is evil, that which is dark. And so what happens is now you have, you can see me again. Oh, next image. So you see another aspect of the 12 gates will appear in this one. Let's go to the next one. So that's area. That's the 12 gates. That's kind of cool. And look, yeah, goddesses. Cool, right? Okay, let's go to me. So what we've done, of course, is we've gone through quite a bit. I think you understand the Book of the Dead more than before, or perhaps. At the same time, it is a lesson in human nature, right? I just kind of can't stop laughing about the gates one. It's like, we want something, come on, we want something easy. and after going through the Book of the Dead, wouldn't you want to have the easy deasy one too? And as opposed to having these loathsome monsters, Book of Gates is nice and clean. But again, it is also a constant conflict between the upper class and the lower class. Those who are wealthy feel like they need to have special privileges, and we get the chance to live, forever. Pyramid texts. Only we have the way, the mysteries. And then what happens is that those mysteries, the pyramid texts with the coffin texts, start to filter out to everybody. Well, at least people who can afford a coffin with it. It's like, oh, we can have this way too. And then all of a sudden it goes, in fact, we want something that is in book form. But when it goes in book form in the Book of the Dead, in that form, papyrus and then linen, what happens is that it's too much democratization of sacred knowledge. Too much when it comes to everybody can now participate. And those who are the upper class are going, yeah, but we want to feel special. We want to have a special way. And so, and meanwhile, as the Book of the Dead becomes more homogenized, it becomes more alike, you have the Amduat for the privileged, but don't worry, not far behind. And concurrently, all of a sudden you have the Book of the Gates saying, yeah, well, we have that too. So it is the idea that we all deserve eternal life. We all deserve to keep on living. It's not just a privileged position. Those in authority, it should be for everyone. And what I like about all of this is that even though Yes, Egyptian deities will be Egyptian deities. They will smite and do things that sound like the Hebrew Bible. However, you still have also this sense of deep affection, this deep love. The Egyptians do love their gods. We know this from their own writings. They're not forced to by fear. They describe many of these gods with attributes of being benevolent, of being kind-hearted, of being righteous, of being looking for truth. But the reality is, even though life was always tough in ancient times, life was a little easier in ancient Egypt. Not completely Egypt, just a little easier. You see, what happens in poor Mesopotamia is so sad. They're there and they hate their gods because the terrain is horrible. It's like, it's hot for forever. And then all of a sudden when it rains, it floods. And so they say, well, these gods, they have these powers. They're immortal. They're invincible, and they're able to make themselves invisible, especially when we want them around. They beg them to help them. Sure, there's a few that love them, but they fear them. So much of the literature is about fear. They're scared. They're trying to appease them. But when we get to Egypt, you have this thing called the Nile. There's no denial or a Nile about it. And what happens is that you sit around, and during, August and September, it starts to flood. All this fresh, wonderful mud comes downstream from Nubia, has come on down. And what happens is they built their houses up kind of on stilts or further back. And so the water basin goes like this, deposits all this fresh soil, and then it goes down. And it's all this fresh soil, and all I have to do is plant, and wow, we love our gods. They sure take care of us. In Mesopotamia, they have to come up with something called irrigation and field rotation and everything else, and fertilizer to be able to compensate, to be able to survive. So you have a genuine love. But the other thing is, the big factor I want to mention is the fact that they had to have enjoyed their life because they wanted it to continue on. You see, in Mesopotamia, they didn't look forward to life going on. They just wanted cursed life to end, and quickly. They talk about the idea of turning like bats and squeaking, and that's it. The everlasting life wasn't much. But when you get to Egypt, they're going, hey, you know what? They're enjoying life well enough that they're thinking to themselves, I just want to keep it going. I want to continue living on. That is evidence for a life, or at least a lifestyle. Even though they still got sick, they still suffered, they still had anxieties, things were still pretty good from an ancient context in Egypt, to the point where even that is echoed in the Bible, right? Remember that? The place of the melons, onions, they want, if we want to go back to Egypt, because Egypt was a nicer place to live. And so what happens is that you get this idea that the Egyptians love life enough to want to continue on, and that life, that afterlife, is a happy one. It's in fact, I'll be honest, it's one of the happiest afterlife kinds of paradise that I know of. It is. I mean, we have so many descriptions of. I'm not saying the Judeo-Christian concept is not happy. We just don't have enough on it, or Islam. There's not enough written about it. But the Egyptians go in detail. They tell you exactly what it's like, and they go on forever. There should be a book out there that'd be thick of talking about all the afterlife concepts they have. Put it all together. That'd be a good book to write. And you realize that the Egyptians have a very happy afterlife. That's because they at least had a somewhat happy life, during their time. The other thing is that I want to bring up is the fact that there is all throughout this kind of weavings of possible reincarnation. You can see it here and there, but it's not systematic enough. We know that they did believe in it, but it's hard to put it together in a coherent fashion with these earlier texts. It's a little easier later on, but we do know that this is a belief that maybe it's something worth exploring. Other than that, I guess we descended into the underworld together, and we ascended into the upper world. So having done this rite of passage and having survived, I will release you and let you go to the field of reeds. Reedfeld is leading you out to the field of reeds. There we go. And it is done.